What's what? Don't hesitate. Okay, and now we're recording. Okay, so we will get started. Welcome, everybody, officially. Good evening to our February Think and Drink. Um, I think that this person doesn't really need an introduction, but I will do it anyway. So tonight we are lucky to have Debbie Seabrook joining us after I twisted her arm. Um, and she's going to be joining us on Saturday too. I will send the link in the chat once we get started. So if anybody is still interested in signing up, you can certainly do that for Saturday. We're going to be walking at Caw for that walk and talk. So just a little bit, just to give you a little bit of where Debbie comes from with this topic. So she's explored herbalism through the medical botany classes taught by April Punslian and Wild Herb Academies in season monthly membership, and also through herbalism for beginners classes with Hannah Weber, owner of Herbal Passions. And since these exposures, she's taken every opportunity to learn and experience the world of herbalism. And then, of course, she's a master naturalist. And so she began to really put all of those connections to get together, the interdependency of all of nature, which she says it surprisingly includes us humans, and also stems from plants, pun intended. Plants eat light, they inhale our exhales, and they exhale what we need to inhale. And they offer food, shelter, beauty, and healing. And so we're just going to kind of build on that tonight. And we will, I don't know where she went from my screen. I hope she's still there. I will turn it over to her to start the evening off. Debbie, are you still there? Did we lose her? All right, let's see what happens. Oh,
I don't think I'm muted.
oh, good. You're there. Okay, fantastic. I'm turning it over to you. And if everybody could just mute themselves, that would be great. Thank you.
And I have absolutely no idea how to see things on this.
Oh, and also, so sometimes there's a little technical difficulty. So again, if you might need to turn up your volumes on your side just so you can hear Debbie really well. So it's all you, Debbie.
Yeah, but I can't see my stuff. I'm screen sharing. I'm going to hit share again and see if I can find.
Okay, it is up. We can see it. It's in full screen mode.
Oh, maybe I'll do that. Hang on. So I can't see y'all in my shared screen at the same time. So I'm going to be blind. Hold on. Oh, hi. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see my Yopon and other free beverages.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's full screen. Yep.
Okay, cool. I want to thank y'all for coming. And one of the first things I want to do is say that there are a few things that I have personally experienced, but most of this stuff I did not research and get into journals that talked about indigenous people and how they used Yopon. I'm working off of a lot of references and resources, and I'll have those up, or some of those up, as many as I could figure out how to put on the computer up at the end of this talk. So there's a lot of different things that I'm talking about that I like the resources from, but I don't think that it was, don't want you to think that I did the research. So I first wanted to talk about Yopon, and let's see, oh goody, can make it go. And the history of Yopon. And I've got lovely things for you to look at, but this tea, we just kind of forgot about how lovely it was and how yummy it was. And most of you know that you hear this from several people, but this is the only naturally caffeinated tea plant in North America. But for so many years, most of us just kind of forgot that was there. It's a delicious tea. It's very sippable. It has plentiful theobromide, and which is the bromine, which is the thing that's in chocolate, and it has a little bit of caffeine in it. But because of the other chemicals in it, it gives you a boost for caffeine and a little bit of focus without the jitteriness that a lot of other more highly caffeinated beverages give you. It also contains very few tannins. Um, so those tannins create a bitterness in things, and they create a bitterness in the tea that we're used to hearing and talking about, the Camellia sinensis tea. So you can use re-steep the leaves of this tea several times without any change of flavor. Um, this tea, this product, was at one time so popular that the British East India Company considered it a threat to their control of the world's tea market. Um, which I think is kind of interesting. The um, so the plant was discovered, and well, it was discovered that Native Americans were using this plant um, for consumption, and the folks that first wrote it down from our perspective were the Spanish when they arrived in northern Florida in 1565. They were amazed at the height and robust health of the indigenous there, and they quickly picked up on the daily practice of drinking yopan. Just a few years later, um, a Spanish court physician, Francisco Hernandez, who had spent who had been sent there by King Philip to find medicinal herbs sent to the Americas, arrived at the Florida outpost of St. Augustine and discovered that the Spanish citizens there had been consuming so much yopan that, and the quote from the document that they found was, that any day a Spaniard does not drink it, he feels like he's going to die. I think that they were probably writing down caffeine withdrawals, right? um, so that tea was from a book called The Black Drink, the Native American Tea. Anthropologist Charles Hudson wrote, around the time of the American Revolution, Yopon holly was widely grown for tea on colonial farms, and there was an established tea trade with Europe. Before that, the archaeological record tells us that Native Americans had been drinking Yopon for at least 8,000 years ago in Florida and had established an extensive, well ordered Yopon trading network 500 years before the Europeans arrived, which extended hundreds of miles north. So there are little pockets of Yopon growing in places where it really shouldn't grow. And they think that that's because of the trade of the indigenous folks. Um, and apparently there's been evidence discovered that Yopon and cacao were combined by Mayans to make a sacred ceremonial drink. But as we get on down, when the European settlers were here and they were sending tea back to Europe, they marketed it as Cassina, which is one of the common names, or Carolina tea, or South Seas tea in England, and it was called Appalachian in France. And it also was called Liberty Tea in Boston when it replaced the imported tea during the days of the Boston Tea Party. So a little bit later, a German botanist noted in his journal that Yopon tea had become so popular that the British East India Company was increasingly alarmed about the threat to their control of the world's tea market. By 1789, Britain was actually trying to limit the amount of the American tea sold in Europe. And they found an ally in a famed botanist named William Alton, who had been appointed by King George to be the superintendent of the Royal Botanical Gardens. So he was kind of in on the way of fixing an error that Linnaeus had made, an error in quotation marks that Linnaeus had made, and when they labeled the Yopon holly, they initially called it Ilex cassine, Cassine, because the Native Americans had called it cassina. And it became a common name in Britain as well. So apparently Linnaeus thought Yopon and a newly discovered, and they say dragoon holly, and I think they're calling dracoon with a C instead of a G, but it's written here as dragoon holly. So he thought it was the same plant, and it wasn't the same plant, even though those two different species go both tagged with the same name. So that lovely royal gardener William Alton and the friend of King George came in and said, because there were so many reports that natives would drink Yopon tea mixed with other things and boiled really, steeped really strongly, and acting as a purgative or something that made them vomit during ceremonies. So it was a purification ceremony. So he was fixing the Linnaeus taxonomic error. And he's the one that said Cassine needs to be the dragoon holly, and Yopon holly, we'll just call it vomitoria, right? Um, so this helped to cause the decline of the product's appeal, right? Um, that combined with the 1800s and the way that the Americas had um, really destroyed Native American communities and um, culture, all the traditional relationships were severed, and the knowledge of how to process it and use it was forgotten. So this pushed the idea of Yopon into the far, it says, the far reaches of human memory, to be forgotten for more than a century and a half. Um, but the phrase "everything old becomes new again" is one that it really works well here. And also Rosemary Gladstar, some of you may, if you're into herbalism, might know that name. She has said that she believes plants step up when they're most needed and that people recognize it and then it spreads like wildfire. So Yopon holly has, meh, I mean, I'm not going to say it's gotten really, really big, but in comparison to what it was, there's a lot of interest. There's companies that produce Yopon tea now that you can buy just bags of Yopon tea processed in different ways or combined with different other herbs or flavorings. Um, and there's an American Yopon Association. Um, they're pretty small. They have at least 6 members who are working at the actual production and sale of Yopon. Um, hmm. One of the things that the one account that one of the members of the Yopon Association read was some thousands of years ago. They, when they were making Yopon tea with cacao, they would make froth on the beverage by blowing into it with a hollow reed. And that person writes down, she thinks that that makes them the world's first artisanal baristas. She uses a whip to make froth on her tea. Um, so one of the things about that I've learned is that it was also used during the Revolutionary War, um, and it was used during the Civil War, um, to replace or substitute for coffee and tea that was more desirable, but not available. Let's see. So the botanical information on Yaupon, you may know, it's in the holly family. There's several different common names for it. It's called Ilex vomitoria. As I was getting into herbalism and particularly into what the different kinds of plants do, as opposed to a lot of herbalism, it seems to me, is often trying to substitute our medical profession, the way that we look at medicine today, which is have a problem, take a pill. And a lot of folks seem to look at herbalism with have a problem, take an herb. And it doesn't really work like that. There's a lot of different ways that things combine and properties that might be better for different situations. But a lot of it follows the family. I had, when I first started um, in the naturalist world, Christina will probably be able to testify to this. I was so against learning any kind of Latin names, any kind of botanical names, drove me absolutely nuts. And yet I have found through the study of the herbalism that I've gotten into, particularly the medical botany classes that April puts on, um, is that the family, the medicinal properties stay in the family. So a lot of things that are used in Chinese herbal medicine or ways that holly is used or whatever it is, there are several, often several different species under that family that are going to be used very similarly. So makes me fussy. I wanted to, yeah, okay. Um, so I wanted to make sure that you knew the physical characteristics of Yaupon, particularly since we're talking specifically about Yaupon. And I got some pictures. I made them as big as I could. I hope you can see them well because there's some details that I want you to notice. On the first picture here, this Yaupon is showing you that the leaves are alternate on the Yaupon, right? And they have, they call it crenellations, or it's crenellated. The edges of the leaf, they're not quite like pokey like American holly is pokey at all, but they more are, it's a little bit more than toothed though. But they have this little edge to them. It's not a smooth edge to them. Um, Obviously they have the red berries you see in the middle, and you see some of the leaf structures there. They've got really pretty blooms. They should start blooming soon. They're an early bloomer, 4 petals to the blooms, and they're very tiny. They hug usually the stems. And then when it new growth is coming out, you can see that the new growth is often got a purple or reddish tinge to it, and the new twigs are often reddish purple. So, okay. So things to keep in mind about foraging. Um, and I kind of want to start with a video that I want to try and play for you. Um, and then we'll get back to talking about that particular foraging, okay? So this is a, oh, stop moving. This is a lovely lady that she's on social media. She's called the Black Forager. Her name is Nicole. It's something that begins with an A, and I never can remember, and I should have written that down. But it starts this clip is about 4 minutes long. It starts out pretty fast. There's been a person on the social media hype fairly recently who didn't know the difference between, or correction, who thought there was a strong difference between lemons that she bought in the grocery store. she didn't realize that the lemons she could pick off of the lemon tree that she had in her yard were the same thing. When she posted that, she kind of got blasted, and this is kind of coming off of that. Okay.
Hmm.
Is that going to work? Oops, hang on.
Right, yeah.
Okay, let's try that again.
The only person on the planet that didn't know that you could just pick a piece of fruit off the tree. Right, yeah. There's actually like a whole story for why you don't know that, and I made a chart to explain it. That's the lemon. Unsurprising to anyone who knows anything about U.S. history, the first part of the story hinges around racism. So there was racism, and then there was the Emancipation Proclamation. If you don't remember, that was when Hat Man said that we were people now. But after that happened, previously to being freed, slaves like foraged and fished and trapped on the lands where they were being held, like on the plantations they worked on. But the plantation owners were like, "Well, buddy, you could gather things when you work here for free, but I don't like that now." So because of that, the South passes a bunch of laws that turns trespassing from a civil offense to a criminal offense. And that was specifically to keep Black and Indigenous people from foraging on land they don't own. And the kicker of that is they don't own land. So, bing, bang, boom, those laws also catch on nationwide. So the first chapter of our story closes with people not being able to gather fruits, foods, any sort on land that doesn't belong to them. So that concludes this chapter. The next chapter, also racism. For thousands of years, indigenous groups here in North America managed lands and waters using all sorts of methods like controlled burns, and they formed mutually beneficial relationships with a lot of the plants and the animals and the fungi. And then after that, white people. They got here and they said, this does not look like a farm. So obviously, no one must be tending to it. Hashtag untouched wilderness. Hashtag we about to wild out in these streams. And they wilded out so hard that they decided, we need to set aside some land where we're not allowed to wild out anymore. And they did that through the Park Service. But when they created the Park Service, they used hands-off conservation, which was based in this original idea that the land didn't look like people were tending to it because it didn't use European farming methods. And so they believed in order to keep the lands immaculate, no one could touch them. And so with that, you can also now not gather food in parks. Love you. So to catch you up, that is now no free food from private land and also no free food from public land. So you can gather food on your own land. So obviously we would still learn how to do that, right? Rock. Our final chapter and why you don't know that you can gather lemons from trees, classism. All the isms are getting their time. Welcome to the 1900s, jazz and dust bowl. Oh no, world war. And as we get close to the halfway point of this century, grocery stores and refrigerators are popping up. It is the cool kid way to be getting all of your food. Oh, only poor people gather their own food. By the 1960s, that's how people were feeling about foraging, by and large. Of course, this doesn't mean everybody. Which then leads to, oh my God, no one likes me anymore because Barbara said I act poor. And so what did people do? They stopped foraging. They stopped picking their own food. No one wants to look poor. Everyone wants to keep up with the Joneses. And who were those people? Our parents and grandparents. And some of you guys are infants, so probably great-grandparents too. So you know who didn't teach us about any of those things? Our parents and our grandparents. So now a lot of people our age don't know. It led to what I call the big food forgetting, in which people in Western communities are super detached from their food. We have no part in it anymore, except for what we pick out at the grocery store, really. And that is why my homegirl thought that her store lemons and her tree lemons were not the same lemons. Honestly, it could happen to anybody. I know people are giving her a rough time in the comments. And that big food forgetting is part of the reason why I make the content that I do, teaching people what wild food they can find in their own neighborhoods. I think we deserve to remember. Anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Happy snacking, don't die.
My goodness.
So let me get back to, am I still screen sharing, right? So I need to go back to the Yopon presentation and open that back up. Like that. Yes? Okay.
Thumbs up.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So foraging. The first thing that you want to know is if you can forage at the place that you're going to go forage. We have very special, very unique permission from the manager at Caw to do what we're doing on Saturday, but you can't forage in general at Caw. You can forage in some of the WMAs that are what do you call them? Wildlife management areas, the WMAs. Obviously, you can forage in your yard and your neighbor's friends' yards or whatever. And particularly for Yopon and a lot of the things I'm going to talk about or touch on, they are everywhere. But just be really careful about where you're foraging and realize that there's a lot of places that you can't forage. Take what's available, not more than 5%. Be very conscious of what you're, now we're talking about Yopon, it's basically a wood weed. But if you're talking about other things, just be cognizant of what you're having to leave there. And it's a process to give back when you're foraging, at least in a mental way, asking permission from the plant to take part of the plant, thanking the plant for taking part of the plant. At least that feeling of gratitude, which is so different than the it's all mine, I'm going to the grocery store and buying everything kind of thing. It's not a consumerism, it's a reciprocity that we're wanting to share. Because the plants are doing what they're doing without any thought for the outcome, right? In my introduction, I talk about they breathe what we exhale and they exhale what we need to breathe. Just acknowledging that, and also giving back to your human community. If you learn about Yopon or some other thing, share it. Share the information, share the way to do things, supporting others, and figuring this all stuff out for yourself. And also about foraging, don't ever stop learning. And never, ever, 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 ever consume anything that you have any doubt about what it is. And if you don't think you have a doubt, check again. And one of the things that I personally want to make sure of is that if you're out with me and we're nibbling on things, if you have any kind of allergic issues in general, you might want to be very cautious about adding things to your diet in an uncontrolled fashion. Just be really careful with how you're going to go from there. I wanted to talk about just making tea in general and how one makes tea. It seems to me that there are times and people just that they haven't experienced taking a product in a bag or a jar that's not in a tea bag to make a tea. So how much do you use? How much water do you use? What's the temperature of the water? How long? So all of that stuff, I can give you rules or guidelines to do it, but it truly is all malleable. You can change what you want. What I would suggest is starting out with an herb with a water carrier to get the constituents, all the chemicals and things out of we're going to call it herb if we're talking about Yopon, whatever greenish thing that we're using. And I generally encourage people to make a small, and this is what I do myself, make a small amount of a mild weak tea to start with, taste it, see if I like it, see if I want it to have more of that flavor. Different things make that happen. And I also encourage people to start with that central ingredient. So it's called making a simple tea. Just has the yopon in it, as opposed to yopon and cacao and maybe a little mint, and we'll see if we can throw in some rosemary. What the heck? That just kind of muddles things, and you're not identifying what's going on with your body and with that herb. When you're using water um, to process herbs like this, there's an infusion and a decoction. An infusion is like you're used, well, like most people are used to making um, your regular black tea, and that is you heat up water to boiling or almost boiling, and then you have your tea in your herb in something. You pour the water in the herb together, and then you leave it for 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, just depending on what this is and what you want to do. I would start with 3 to 5 minutes to start with, and then, you know, play with it back and forth. um, and then there's something called a decoction. Usually you use an infusion for the lighter parts of the plant, flower parts and leaf parts. If you're using bark or roots or stems as a thing that you're trying to draw your constituents, your herbal ingredients from, then a lot of times you want to boil the product. So you put a little bit of that product in a small pot and you boil it. And how long do you boil it? Well, you boil it generally until you see a color change. And I would stop there, test it on myself, drink it, see if I like it, see if it does what I want it to do. And then you can maybe boil it longer or boil more of it if you wanted a stronger product. Um, so I'll be bringing some things to Call to show you, and I'll try to show you at the end of this as well. But there's different kinds of things to use. I generally put my product in, I just use a mixing cup because it's got the little spout so I can pour it into something else easily. So I put my dried herbs in the bottom of the in a like a 1 cup mixing or 1 cup measuring cup, glass measuring cup, and I pour the hot water on top of that. I let it steep for the time that I want to, excuse me, and then I strain it through a fine meshed strainer into something that I'm going to drink from, the cup that I'm going to drink from. And that's how I process it for me. But there's all kinds of other ways to do this. I usually put a lid on something that's steeping, particularly if it's really cold. And that's supposed to keep more of the volatile oils and things in the in the product. The other thing is that you can make an infusion without heat, and that's often called well, it's called lots of things. You can cold brew something. You've heard of cold brew coffee, probably. Um, you can also do a sun tea or a moon tea. People will use herbs and often have them in, it's usually not water, but in vinegar or something for a month or a moon cycle, or decant it on a particular moon phase. Those spiritual energies might be something that you want to practice or experiment with as well. Okay. There's all kinds of things that you can make tea from. And working as an herbalist in any fashion, I really don't think, and the herbalists that I talk to say this as well, it's not how many things that you can play with and use, it's how well you know a few things, and what you work with. But so we have different kinds of things that you can use as a source for something that you combine with water. I really like pine if you've got a cold or respiratory problems. I have never heard of anybody, it could be, but I've never heard of anybody, and I've never used it as a dried product. I just use it absolutely fresh. Go pull it off of, gets me outside when I'm feeling sick. I go pull it off of some trees and the tips of growing tips, chop them up and put them in water, steep them for a little while, and then drink the water. I also like to breathe that. It's really good for your respiratory system. Our eastern red cedar, which is really a juniper, that one you can make tea out of as well. Obviously, you can make tea out of the official tea plant, the Camellia sinensis. Um, Baccharis is also used as a tea. It's called Mangalar tea in Louisiana. It's a Creole. Use it all the time, apparently, and you can purchase it under that name. But one of its names is consumption bush, and it's really good for treating respiratory issues. Mulberry, the leaves, I absolutely love as a tea. It's one of my favorite things, and it's been used in Chinese herbal medicine for a very long time. They use it as a hangover cure. So it's just a tonic. It just is a good thing to drink, and I think it tastes lovely. You can use wax myrtle as a tea, and it's used sometimes you can just take the leaves and use them in soup that needs a little bit of flavoring. It tastes bay. So, and then I've put a few of the weeds that come out now. And all of those can be used in different ways. Um, One of the best ways to use those things, cleavers, chickweed, and dollarweed, and again, I would do it one at a time, is to take some of it, put it in some water and in a blender, blend it up and strain it, and then drink the green juice, and that is full of chlorophyll and all kinds of lovely things to to boost your immune system and just make you feel good. Hmm. So how do I make tea? Like I said, it seems that if you know this, I apologize, but there's a lot of people that don't know a lot of things, and it's not hard. It's just you've not been exposed to it. So harvest the amount that you would use. Um, and like for if you're going to use it fresh, like for maybe a peppermint tea, if you've got peppermint growing in your yard, or pine tea, I would chop the ingredients up a little bit and add water, steep for 3 to 5 minutes, strain and drink, hot or cold. If you're going to try and take a fresh product to make a dried herb, harvest the amount that you can process and use. I always encourage you to take the leaves off of the stems or twigs. Generally, although Yaupon is often processed using and leaving the smaller leaves or smaller twigs and stems on the plant. If it's something big like the mulberry leaf, I curl that up and chop it. Um, I dry it on the lowest setting in my oven until it's crisp, and then I crush it to add to the water. So I leave it in as kind of as big a pieces as I can store comfortably, and then I don't make it into smaller pieces on purpose anyway until until I'm ready to use it, until I'm ready to steep the material. Now, Yaupon, they say you can um, you can make tea out of that fresh. You can pull the leaves off and make it from the fresh product. You can also roast it till it's crispy, just so it's dried. And you can roast it longer so that the leaf turns a little bit browner, and you get a more full-bodied flavor. They also talk about taking Yaupon, I've never done it, but taking Yaupon in a dried skillet and applying heat to the bottom and kind of moving the material around until it turns darker. And I talked about cold brews and decoctions and infusions, and here are my references. So I've taken a couple of courses with April Punsalon, and she's available at Wild Herb Academy. She's done all kinds of talks for lots of folks. And then there's some different places that I've looked for Yaupon information. If y'all haven't run into this Francis Porchet's book for resources of the Southern Fields and Forests, it is available electronically, and it's really good to look at. It's 900 pages long, though. Excuse me, I'm having talking too much problems.
Thank you, Debbie. Are you good to take some questions? Oop. We just lost you.
Ah,
Oop, oop. You're muted.
That's so you can't hear me coughing.
Okay.
oh, ah.
Are you good? You're good with some questions?
If I can
Anyone has any
talk,
questions?
give me a
Yeah.
second.
Okay. Take
Debbie,
your time. Have some tea.
Debbie, could you clarify, please? I think I got this right. The tea that you're making, are they the leaves from the Yopon holly?
Yes, absolutely. Just the regular leaves from Yopon holly. Um, yeah, it's ridiculously easy to do, but it seems to not flip all the switches in our minds anymore.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to make sure I had that straight. So when you're saying Yopon, you're talking about Yopon holly.
Yeah, Ilex vomitoria, the Yopon holly that it truly is. If a lot of folks who grow there do forestry work, it's just everywhere. In the places it likes, it pops up like a weed. It's just a weed shrub or a weed tree, but it provides. It's got a lot of great chemicals, phytochemicals in it. It's very supportive. Just a nutritive tea, and you got the caffeine, but it because of the theobromine in it, which is the same happy stuff that's in chocolate. It doesn't make you have the jitters. It doesn't. I don't know if you've ever overbrewed your iced tea when it gets bitter. Yopon doesn't. It's really hard to make it bitter. You can, I suppose, but it's really hard. It doesn't really get bitter. I think that it tastes to me like a mild green tea with absolutely no bitterness to it. So I don't need any sweetener in it.
Is it better if you dry it out first or take it, moist right off the plant and use it? Does the tea come out differently?
The tea will come out differently. And that's something to experiment with. And that's kind of one of the cool things about playing with herbs and anything in the woods like this is you can try it out and see what you like. So if you like a more robust thing, a lot of times you might want to try the darker roasts for it. And if you are really concerned about gathering things and processing them yourselves, like I said, Yopon is available. It's not available locally that I know of, but there's some places in Savannah, Georgia, and Mississippi that you can purchase it from.
Thank you.
I'm still out of breath.
Take a moment. Well, anybody else have questions? You're welcome to put them in the chat. I'm happy to read them, or you can unmute yourselves and jump right in. If anybody has questions about what Debbie's talked about or what will happen on Saturday.
I have a question for Debbie. Um, so I know you said you didn't do a ton of extra background research, and I'm really embarrassed that I'm just now making this connection. When I lived in South America for a bit, they drink something very similar to what you're teaching about with Yopon, yerba mate, who I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen at least the cans of yerba mate drink now, but that is Ilex paraguayensis, so it's definitely in the same genus as Yopon. So I'm curious if what you've learned, has there been any connections between Native South American and Native North Americans, like trading these recipes almost, or like these teas?
I hadn't seen that, and I did have it in my notes, but I didn't read it. Sorry, I didn't put it on a slideshow, so I forgot to read it. But you're right. They they're the yerba mate um has a lot of similar, but it seems to be like it's a stronger, has been used stronger than the Yopon has. But it is in the same family, and that's what I was talking about earlier on. The same botanical family will often have things in it. So you kind of got to get to the woo-woo point, because that's why I wore my beads tonight. Because I really think that if we allow our earth, which is our mother earth, to take care of us, that these plants are around us and can support us in so many different ways, and they're everywhere. So if there's not one, if obviously if the yerba mate, which is a South American plant, doesn't grow here, surprise, we've got one that does something very similar. Um, and the same thing with the pine species, the same thing with a lot of the different herbs that get used over and over again. So I think that it's a really cool thing. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks, Alyssa.
That's so cool. I'll bring some on Saturday because I just
Oh,
got
well, you
my
have.
shipment. Yeah.
Oh, wow, cool.
I'll
Huh.
bring some for all of us.
Mhm. That's great.
Anybody else? Comments, questions, observations?
Okay, I have a couple of other things that I'm going to
Okay.
tell you. So another thing that happens with Yopon, and I don't want you, like I was telling you earlier, make sure that you know what you're getting. Yopon is an evergreen, and one of the more common things I think that is confused with Yopon is Chinese little leaf privet. And so it has a very similar leaf shape. It doesn't have the little teethy things, the crenellations that we talked about before. Does not turn purple. It's not evergreen. And the leaves are opposite. So there's a lot of things that are very different from it, but you have to be aware. You don't, I don't know that it's horribly bad for you. I just don't know what privet does as a tea, but I wouldn't drink it right now unless I did a lot of studying. And that's something else I actually wanted to mention is that um, we have, my husband does this too. We have this crazy fear of going outside and picking something and putting it in our mouths. Um, People, you don't need to fear that. Um, April, I lean on April Punsalon a lot. And by the way, she's written a book. It's coming out in April. Surprise, April. But and I've pre-ordered it. I would highly encourage you to get it. I'll be bringing some books with me too. But she says there's about 3,000 species of plants in South Carolina, either three or four, that exist in South Carolina. She can think of, and all the research she's done, she was a botanist protecting rare plants, that maybe there's 10 of them that will make you sick, and maybe there's two that would kill you. It's not going, most of the time, the stuff you're picking, you might, the vomitoria part might come alive for you, but that's about as bad as it's going to get. Um, so yeah, just be really aware of what you're getting to. Um, I wanted to show you some books. This is a fun book. And this one is it's all over the United States and maybe even beyond, because a lot of the things that they talk about are very widespread. This is one of my favorite books for figuring out how to use herbs, and she's talking more about kitchen herbs or about your normal things that you would find uh, in your herb store. Like Herbal Passions is my herb to go to, or herb store, or places like Mountain Rose is another place that you can order herbs from, but that's Rosemary Gladstar. Um, if y'all haven't run into this book, I don't think it's used in the Master Naturalist class. Um, but it's a really great book to learn about plant families. Um,
Hmm.
Here's another book to process things. So it's making skin health. This is more about things that you apply to your body rather than things that you put in your body. And then, barring April's book, which I'm pretty sure I know what's going to be in it, this is the best identification type book for this area. He's a little bit more um, in the Appalachian Mountain kind of places, but most of these things are here. Not all of them, but most of them. and he's got a school up there too. So Corey Pine Shane is his name. So if y'all have any questions, jump in, but I'm playing show and tell. This is my favorite teapot. It's a cast iron type teapot, very heavy. Like it because it stays really warm. And you put a basket inside of it. Put your herbs in the basket, fill it up with water. This thing holds about 2.5 cups of water. So this is one of my favorite things to use to make tea. And then, like I said, I use just a regular measuring cup because it's got a spout. And then I pour it through my lovely stained mesh strainer. But this mesh, it's plastic, but metal reacts to certain things. So I worry about the metal. You can also use fabric, old t-shirts, if you know that they've been washed with appropriate things, or even y'all help me, cheesecloth. This is one of those strainers that goes on your teacup. So you can do the same thing that I used to do with the teapot, but this one doesn't fall down into the teacup. And then this is my other favorite thing. Right. So if you come on Saturday, it might get you. So, all right, spark something else because I know I've forgotten something else. Anybody?
Debbie, I've got a semi-technical question you might not be able to answer, but I've experimented with Yaupon before in the past, and I've done a little digging. I've read that like caffeine content varies wildly across native populations, and I want to know if you have some of the good stuff that has the caffeine in it. Because I didn't get much out of the plants in my yard. And also, I extended an invitation to anyone if you want to forage Yaupon and you can't make it a conca, you're more than welcome to cut it out of my azaleas. You can have all you want.
Good job.
Um,
Yes. So, and I'm so if it's grown in the shade, and I'll give you the reference. I got this from the people who were working at they had a grant. So this the PBS reference. I'll pull it back up. But if it's grown in the shade, it has more caffeine. And if it's grown in the sunshine, it has more theobromide in the theo complexes. And I'm about 90% sure that I've got that right. I could have it reversed. But let me find that thing for you because it's this Yaupon Tea Company PBS startup episode is where that information came from. So, and it was during the talk that he was doing. I lost my screen. There we go. So it was during he did an interview. They'd had a business startup episode from PBS, and it was on this Yaupon Tea Company. And during the discussion of things he was talking about, because they had a grant. I didn't follow up to see if they actually succeeded or not, but I think it was like 2 or 3 years old was the PBS show. And they had a grant and they did a lot of studies and apparently were doing a lot of analysis of the tea, of the plant, trying to get it into a way that it could be farmed. It could be functional as a product. So that was one of the things that he had big areas of shade. So
cool. I went and found it, so I'll double check on that. But I'd love to know on that. I'm starting up a food forest, and I want to put some Yaupon in there for demonstration. And I want to make sure that it's actually the good stuff, so that people come back and get it.
Hey, now the theobromide is the good stuff.
We mix it 50-50.
Okay. It still doesn't have it's got the amount of caffeine in it that basically tea, like the Camellia sinensis has in it. It's not. I've even heard people say it's got 10 times as much caffeine as coffee, and that's just kind of crazy. No,
Well, as a man who drinks straight black coffee, I didn't get a kick out of it, so I think those are lies.
Perhaps you should get off of coffee for a little while and then try it, and maybe that will let
I'd
you know.
probably die.
Yeah. Anybody else? I appreciate your listening, and I hope you have lots of fun.
We
How often do
appreciate
you drink
you.
Yopon tea each day? I don't drink hardly anything each day except water. Um, sorry, Alyssa. Yeah, actually, the plant that I probably drink the most of is mulberry, which is I'm going to bring some to show you that I processed, but I've got like a teacup process, and enough to make another cup or two of tea, maybe a pot of tea, but that's about it. I'm
So
about
are
out.
they the leaves from the mulberry tree?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
And there's more than one type of mulberry.
there
Do you
is.
have the botanical name for the one that makes tea?
All of them. Isn't that fun? So the Chinese um mulberry
Mhm.
that we have here all over the place, that is actually it's crossbreeding with our red mulberry.
Hmm.
Um and so apparently I've been told that the way that it crossbreeds, it's going to win. But um and I really wish I could have gotten the reference down, but I've been in different talks with Doug Tallamy,
Mhm.
and he said that that was one of the few plants that it filled the same ecological niche as the native. And it's the one that I've used for tea that's soft because it's not our native mulberry has a more fuzzy leaf,
Mhm.
and I just don't like that in my tea. So I've used the every time I've done it, I've purposefully stayed away from the red mulberries, but you're supposed to be able to do all of them, and it's just a great tea.
Hmm.
That's what I make paper out of, mulberry, the inner
Mhm.
bark of the mulberry.
So many things that we could use more nature with. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well, it's just about 8, and unless anybody has any last minute questions, I'm going to thank Debbie from all of us. Thank you so much for doing this. We so appreciate it. And Saturday again, call 11 o'clock. I put the link if you'd like to register if you haven't already in the chat. The only thing we're asking you to do is bring yourselves and a mug. And you'll get a unique opportunity to do a little foraging with Debbie. So, again, any questions, you can always reach out to me, and I'm happy to try to answer those. And hopefully we'll see many of you on Saturday morning. So again, thank you, Debbie, so much for doing this. And you all have a great rest of the night, and we'll see you soon. And more information is coming about upcoming programs too. So good night, all.
Night, Nikki. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.